Imagine a room filled with 1,000 men. They are screaming, not in anger, not in pain, but in a state of intellectual ecstasy. The noise is deafening, a wall of sound that hits you the moment you open the heavy oak doors. But if you look closely, you notice something terrifyingly strange. Amidst this chaotic roar, not a single person is looking at a phone. Not one person is daydreaming. Their eyes are locked onto ancient texts with a ferocity that looks more like a predator stalking prey than a student reading a book. They are swaying back and forth, a rhythmic, hypnotic motion that seems to synchronize their heart rates with the words they are devouring. This is not a library. This is a cognitive battlefield. I watched a 90-year-old man in this room hold a complex 12-step logical argument in his head for 4 hours without writing down a single word. Meanwhile, the average modern CEO can't sit through a 10-minute Zoom call without checking their email 3 times. We pride ourselves on our productivity apps, our Pomodoro timers, our nootropics, and our biohacking routines. We drink mushroom coffee and wear rings that track our sleep, desperate to squeeze an extra ounce of focus out of our fried dopamine receptors. Yet these men, using a technique that hasn't changed in 2,000 years, are operating at a mental processing speed that makes our best deep work look like a toddler playing with blocks. They call it the Torah, but for the purpose of your bank account and your business, we are going to look at this as the most rigorous, battle-tested system for entering a flow state that has ever existed. I spent months obsessing over this. I didn't want the religion, I wanted the mechanics. I wanted to know how a human brain can override the biological urge for distraction and enter a tunnel of hyperfocus so deep that the rest of the world ceases to exist. What I found wasn't just a study habit. It was a ritual, a specific, replicable protocol that triggers a distinct neurochemical shift. When I adapted this ancient framework into a secular morning routine, the results were not just good, they were disturbing. I stopped working 8-hour days because I literally ran out of things to do by 11 a.m. The mental fog that usually rolls in after lunch vanished. The urge to scroll, to check analytics, to refresh the inbox, it was gone, replaced by a cold, laser-like precision. Most people think focus is the act of trying hard to pay attention. That is the first mistake. Trying to focus is like trying to fall asleep. The more you force it, the further away it gets. The masters of this technique understand that focus is not an action, it is a byproduct. It is what happens naturally when you construct the right environment and engage the right sensory inputs. Let's look at the modern entrepreneur's morning. You wake up. Maybe you grab your phone immediately, flooding your brain with cortisol and other people's problems before you've even brushed your teeth. Or maybe you're disciplined. You meditate for 10 minutes, drink your water, and sit down at your desk in a silent room. You open your laptop, the screen is white, the cursor blinks, and you wait for the inspiration to strike. You wait for the flow. But the silence of the room is actually your enemy. In that silence, your brain starts to scan for danger, for novelty. A car honks outside and you look. A notification pings and you twitch. You are fighting your biology. Now, contrast that with the great yeshivas of the world. The environment is designed to overload the senses in a specific way that forces the brain to shut down peripheral processing. It's a concept called sensory gating. When the room is loud, predictably loud, your brain stops trying to listen to everything and instead creates a tunnel of silence around the one thing you are focusing on. It's the same reason some people work better in a busy coffee shop than in a quiet library. But the ancient scholars take this to an extreme. They don't just tolerate the noise, they create it. They utilize the technique called learning out loud. This is the first pillar of the protocol I'm going to teach you. When you read silently, you are engaging the visual cortex. That's it. It's a passive intake of information. It's easy to skim, easy to zone out. But when you speak the words you are processing and you speak them loudly with intonation and rhythm, you engage the Broca's area and the auditory cortex simultaneously. You are creating a closed loop. You see it, you say it, you hear it. There is no gap for a stray thought to enter. I tried this for the first time on a Tuesday. I had a complex marketing strategy to map out, a task I had been procrastinating on for 3 weeks. I stood up, I didn't sit, I paced around my office and I started speaking my strategy out loud, arguing with myself, vocalizing the problems and the solutions. I looked like a madman. But within 15 minutes, I felt a physical shift in my head. The friction was gone. The hesitation was gone. I wasn't thinking about the work, I was embodying it. But the vocalization is just the surface level. The real secret, the thing that allows these scholars to maintain this intensity for 12 hours straight, lies in the Chavrusa dynamic. In the secular world, we call this an accountability partner, but that's a weak translation. An accountability partner is someone you check in with once a week to say you did your gym workout. A Chavrusa is a combat partner. In the study halls, you never learn alone. You sit across from someone else. Your job is not to agree with them. Your job is to attack their logic. If they make a point, you try to destroy it. If they propose a theory, you find the loophole. This turns learning into a high-stakes game. It spikes adrenaline. It keeps the brain in a state of high alert. You cannot zone out because there is another human being staring you in the face, waiting for you to slip up. Now, you might be thinking, I run an online business. I work alone. I don't have a combat partner. That's fine. I didn't either. I found a way to simulate this neural pressure using a specific writing technique that mimics the adversarial nature of the Chavrusa. It forces your brain to switch from passive consumption to active defense. When you sit down to work, you are usually in input mode or output mode. You're either researching or you're creating. The hyper-focus ritual blends these two. You are constantly inputting data and immediately outputting a challenge to that data. This rapid cycling prevents the buildup of cognitive residue, that feeling of fatigue you get when you've been staring at a screen too long. Let's go deeper into the physiology. I mentioned the swaying earlier. It's called shuckling. To an outsider, it looks like nervous energy. But neuroscientists have studied this. Rhythmic movement, specifically the rocking of the torso, stimulates the vestibular system, which is directly linked to the reticular activating system, the part of your brain responsible for wakefulness and attention. By introducing a low-level rhythmic physical movement, you are essentially keeping your brain's engine revving at high idle. Most of us are taught to sit still and pay attention. That is terrible advice. The human body is designed to move. When you freeze your body, your brain interprets this as a state of rest, and it starts to downregulate your energy levels. By incorporating a subtle, rhythmic motion while you work, even if it's just standing and shifting your weight or using a specific type of active seating, you trick your body into thinking it is in the middle of a hunt. Your focus sharpens because your biology believes action is imminent. So, we have the auditory loop. We have the adversarial mindset. We have the kinetic anchor. These are the components. But having the parts of a Ferrari doesn't mean you can drive it. You need the ignition sequence. You need the specific order of operations that takes you from a groggy, coffee-deprived zombie to a high-functioning executive athlete in less than 20 minutes. I call this the Dawn Protocol. It replaces the typical morning routine of checking emails and doom scrolling. It is designed to maximize the theta-alpha bridge, that brief window of time in the morning when your subconscious mind is most accessible and your critical filters are low. The ancient scholars wake up before the sun. There is a concept called Vatikan, praying exactly at the moment of sunrise. The precision is key. It instills a sense of urgency from the very first second of the day. They don't hit snooze. Hitting snooze is the first broken promise of the day. It sets a precedent of failure that permeates everything else you do. When I started implementing the Dawn Protocol, the first thing I had to change was my relationship with light. We are photobiological beings. Our entire hormonal cascade is dictated by photons hitting our retinas. If the first light you see is the blue light of a smartphone, you are signaling to your brain that it is noon, disrupting your cortisol awakening response. The protocol requires natural light or a specific lux count simulation immediately upon waking. This isn't just wellness fluff, this is the signal that primes the engine. But here is where it gets interesting. Most productivity gurus tell you to eat the frog, to do the hardest task first. I'm going to tell you the opposite. The ancient method uses a ramp-up period. They don't start with the most complex legal texts. They start with warm-ups, simple recitations, familiar patterns. They grease the groove. In business terms, if you try to tackle your biggest, scariest project the second you sit down, you will encounter resistance. Procrastination is just fear. It's your amygdala hijacking your prefrontal cortex. To bypass this, we need to enter the flow state through the side door. We need to trick the brain into working before it realizes it's working. I structured the first 30 minutes of my work block to mimic this ramp up. It involves a very specific type of low-friction, high-reward task that generates immediate dopamine. It's not checking email. That's reactive. It must be proactive. It must be a win. Once that first domino falls, the momentum carries you into the heavy lifting without you even feeling the weight. There is a concept in these circles called bitul Torah. It translates roughly to the wasting of Torah study. But the severity of the term is what matters. It is considered a tragedy to waste even a single second. This creates a scarcity mindset around time. In the secular world, we feel like we have infinite time. I'll do it later. I have all day. This abundance of time is actually a curse. It dilutes our intensity. The protocol artificially induces time scarcity. We work in sprints that are not based on time, but on output. You don't stop when the timer goes off. You stop when the logical argument is complete. This shifts the focus from putting in hours to completing units of work. It sounds subtle, but the psychological impact is massive. You stop watching the clock and start watching the objective. But there is a trap that almost everyone falls into when they first try to apply this level of intensity to their business. I fell into it hard. I burned out in 3 days. I was trying to sprint a marathon. I didn't understand that the scholars have a built-in cooling mechanism, a way to reset the brain's heat gauge so they don't fry their circuits. Without this mechanism, the hyperfocus ritual is dangerous. It can lead to severe mental fatigue and decision paralysis. I discovered this missing piece while reading about the Musar movement, a branch of study dedicated to self-discipline and character development. They realized that pure intellectual horsepower without emotional regulation leads to a crash. They developed a technique to clean the slate every few hours. If you don't incorporate this reset, your morning productivity will destroy your afternoon performance. You will be a genius at 9 a.m. and a vegetable by 2 p.m. I needed a way to sustain the high-voltage focus of the morning throughout the entire day, adapting the rhythm of the yeshiva to the rhythm of a modern corporation. The solution lay in how they handle transitions. In the modern world, we transition by picking up our phones. We finish a task, we scroll Instagram for 5 minutes, then we try to start the next task. This is fatal. It creates attention residue. Your brain is still processing the dopamine hits from the social media while trying to load the context for the new work task. It's like trying to open a new software program while your computer is still trying to close a video game. The RAM is clogged. The ancient method of transition is completely different. It involves zero digital input. It involves a specific type of visual defocusing and a change in physical posture that signals to the brain that Chapter 1 is closed and Chapter 2 is beginning. So, you have the background. You understand the philosophy. You understand that your current method of working is fighting against your own biology. You understand that silence is not the answer and that sitting still is a sedative. Now I am going to give you the blueprint. This is the exact sequence I use to condense 40 hours of executive-level work into 10 hours of morning sprints per week. It requires you to be awake. It requires you to be hungry. And it requires you to leave your phone in another room. The protocol begins the night before. You cannot have a high-performance morning with a low-performance evening. The scholars prepare their texts before they sleep. They know exactly what page they are opening the moment their eyes open. This eliminates decision fatigue first thing in the morning. If you wake up and have to decide what to do, you have already lost. Here is step 1 of the morning execution. It starts with the ignition sound. It is not music. It is not white noise. And it is certainly not the lo-fi beats to study to playlist that has lulled an entire generation of workers into a low-grade hypnotic stupor. The scholars do not study in silence, but they also do not study in chaos. They study in a hum, a wall of vocalized sound. For the modern deep worker, the ignition sound is a consistent, non-melodic audio trigger that you play on loop. I use a specific frequency of brown noise, layered with a very faint, almost imperceptible rhythmic thumping, mimicking the heartbeat. But the sound coming through the headphones is only half the equation. The other half comes from you. You must vocalize the objective. This is where you will feel stupid. This is where the resistance kicks in. You are standing at your desk, yes, standing, we will get to that, and you are going to read the first sentence of your task out loud, not in a whisper, in a declarative tone. If you are coding, you read the comment describing the function. If you are writing copy, you read the headline. If you are analyzing a spreadsheet, you read the column headers. By engaging the larynx, you physically bridge the gap between thought and reality. Thinking is ethereal. Speaking is physical. When you speak the task, you summon it into the room. You are no longer thinking about working, you are working. The ignition sound in your ears cuts off the outside world. Your voice cuts off the inner distraction. Now, step 2. The kinetic anchor. Remember the swaying, the shokalin? You cannot sit static in an ergonomic chair for 4 hours and expect your brain to run at the speed of light. Static bodies produce static minds. The moment you sit back and recline, your brain signals the parasympathetic nervous system that it is time to rest, time to digest, time to consume. We need the sympathetic nervous system. We need the hunt. I bought a standing desk, not for health, but for aggression. When I enter the sprint, I stand with my feet shoulder-width apart, slightly bent at the knees, like a shortstop in baseball waiting for a line drive. I am ready to move. As I work, I allow my body to shift. I pace while I think. I rock while I read. This creates a vestibular input that keeps the reticular activating system in the brainstem firing. You are signaling to your biology that you are in a dynamic environment, that survival depends on awareness. You are tricking your primal brain into thinking the spreadsheet is a saber-toothed tiger. It sounds exhausting, but it is actually energizing. It is the difference between the fatigue of waiting in line at the DMV and the fatigue of playing a sport. One drains you, the other sharpens you. Step 3 is the most critical and the most difficult to master, the Chavrusa simulation. In the yeshiva, you have a study partner. You argue, you debate, you shout. In your home office, you are alone. You must become your own partner. You must split your mind. This is the technique that changed everything for me. I stopped doing the work and started interrogating the work. When I write a strategy document, I don't just type. I type a sentence and then I verbally attack it. Is that true? Is that the best word? Prove it. I answer myself out loud. No, it's weak. Delete it. Try this instead. I became a madman in my office, a schizophrenic genius arguing with the monitor. But the speed was terrifying. By externalizing the critical feedback loop, by making the editing process an auditory debate rather than a silent internal struggle, I bypassed the doubt. Internal doubt is slow and sticky. External debate is fast and kinetic. I remember the first Tuesday I fully committed to this protocol. It was a day that should have crushed me. I had a pitch deck due for a Series B round, a complex financial model to audit, and 3 weeks of backlog on email. Usually, this is a recipe for procrastination. The sheer weight of the mountain makes you want to lie down at the base and sleep. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., no phone. I drank black coffee, enough to feel the caffeine vibrating in my fingertips. I walked into my office. It was dark, save for the single lamp on my desk. I put on the headphones, brown noise cranked to volume level 8. The world disappeared. I stood up. I looked at the blank slide deck. Phase 1, I said to the empty room. The narrative arc. I started pacing. I didn't touch the keyboard yet. I started shouting the story of the company. I was pacing back and forth, gesturing to an invisible audience. The problem is the market is fragmented. The solution is consolidation. But why us? Why now? My body wanted to check email. The dopamine receptors were screaming, just one peek, just see if the client replied. It was a physical itch, a withdrawal symptom manifesting as a tightness in the chest. This is the withdrawal valley. Most people die here. They sit down, they check the phone, and the morning is over. I fought it with movement. I rocked faster. I spoke louder. I forced the energy into the work. I sat down only to type what I had just shouted, then stood up again immediately. 6:30 a.m. The deck was done. Not a draft, a final version. It was sharp, aggressive, perfect. I didn't stop. The brown noise was a river carrying me forward. I opened the financial model, rows and rows of dead numbers. I attacked them. Revenue projection Q3, why is this flat? Look at the churn rate. The churn is wrong. I was pointing at the screen, tapping the glass. I was physically manipulating the data with my voice before my fingers hit the keys. 7:45 a.m. The model was audited and corrected. Now came the emails, the sludge, the place where productivity goes to die. I treated the inbox like a sword fight. I didn't read passively. I read aggressively. Delete, archive, reply, no, call them, next. I moved through 3 weeks of backlog in 45 minutes. I was sweating, physically sweating. My heart rate was 110 beats per minute. I wasn't sitting in a chair. I was in the arena. Then, the climax happened. It was 8:50 a.m. I had finished everything. Everything. The work that was supposed to take me until Friday was sitting there, completed, in folders on my desktop. I took the headphones off. The silence of the house rushed back in. It was deafening. I looked out the window. The sun was just fully up. The neighbors were just getting into their cars, holding their travel mugs, looking tired, dreading the commute, dreading the slow, painful drag of an 8-hour shift where they would accomplish perhaps 90 minutes of real work. I felt like I had just run a marathon and won a boxing match at the same time. My brain was buzzing, not with fatigue, but with a high-voltage clarity that I had never experienced in the corporate world. I wasn't a vegetable. I was a predator who had just finished the hunt. This is the secret that the productivity gurus won't tell you, because it doesn't sell planners and it doesn't sell apps. They sell you ease. They sell you flow as this gentle river you float down. Real flow is not gentle. Real flow is violent. It is a rapid, high-friction engagement with reality. The scholars in the yeshiva know this. They know that to understand God's law, you must wrestle with it. You must grapple with the text until it yields its secrets. We, in the secular world, treat work as a burden to be endured. We try to make it comfortable. We buy soft chairs. We play soft music. We turn down the lights. We try to sedate ourselves through the process. And that is why we are miserable. That is why we are bored. That is why we burn out. Burnout does not come from working too hard. Burnout comes from working without engagement. Burnout comes from the friction of trying to focus while your brain is asleep. When you adopt the kinetic protocol, you stop trying to minimize the effort and start maximizing the intensity. You condense the pain. You take the 40 hours of low-grade, dull, soul-sucking office attendance and you compress it into 10 hours of white-hot, electric performance. The result? You buy back your life. By 9 a.m., I was free. I didn't have to pretend to work for the rest of the day. I didn't have to move the mouse to show I was online. I had the output. The output is the only currency that matters. I spent the rest of the day reading, walking, lifting weights, and being with my family. I was present with them because I didn't have attention residue. I didn't have open loops in my brain. The loops were closed. The enemies were defeated. The territory was conquered. This is the offer I am making to you. It is not an easy path. Your family will look at you strangely when they hear you arguing with a PDF document at 6 a.m. Your colleagues will wonder why you are sweating during a Zoom call because you've been standing and pacing for 3 hours. Let them wonder. Let them sit in their ergonomic chairs, scrolling Instagram, waiting for 5 p.m., slowly decaying into the vegetables they are destined to become by mid-afternoon. You will be different. You will be alive. The blueprint is simple, but the execution requires courage. 1. Ignition. Brown noise. Vocalize the start. 2. Kinetics. Stand up. Move. Rock. Engage the vestibular system. 3. The debate. Never read silently. Never think silently. Argue with the work. Externalize the conflict. Tomorrow morning, do not wake up and check the news. Do not wake up and check the weather. Wake up, drink your coffee, stand in the center of the room, and declare war on the task at hand. The ancient scholars believed that the words on the page were fire, written in black fire on white fire. Treat your work with that level of reverence and intensity,
and you will never suffer from a lack of focus again. The library is open. The noise is waiting. Begin.